Welcome to this episode of Into the Fringe. With me today is Crystal Portillo. She is part of the Resiliency Division. And I had a lot of questions earlier because when I was an agent, I don't believe this was even a thing, but as well as I wasn't very familiar with a lot of the programs the Border Patrol had. And so I think this podcast is going to be very informative for anyone who has questions about it, but more so the Border Patrol agents boots on ground. So if you don't mind, ma'am, please enlighten me on how this is kind of broken down in the Border Patrol.
Yeah, so again, my name is Crystal Portillo. I'm here at Border Patrol headquarters in DC. I fall under what we call the Mission Support Directorate under headquarters. We have different directorates. Ours is MSD, how we call it. Under Mission Support Directorate, we have different components, right? And one of those is resiliency. So within resiliency, we have multiple programs. So we have our peer support, we have chaplaincy, we have veteran support, we have overall resiliency programs, and then the one that I specifically oversee is the Critical Incident Response K9, formerly known as Support K9, SK9, however you want to think of it.
So this is a different entity than the EAP, correct?
Yeah, so part of our job as peer support members, chaplaincy is, while we're helping some of our employees or their families, we get to a point where sometimes we need to refer them to better assistance, if you will. So that's when we actually refer them to EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program. They can offer a variety of services to our employees and families. So once we get to a point where we can no longer help them, they need more of a professional help, if you will, we refer them to the EAP.
How long has this resiliency been part of the Border Patrol?
So resiliency, as far as peer support and chaplains, like those are the ones that you're more familiar with. The Veteran Support Program came into light, a couple of years ago when we really saw the need for veterans assistance. But resiliency focused has really become more important over the last couple of years. So I don't know if you've been familiar with everything that's happened within the Border Patrol. We've experienced a lot of just employee stress, a lot of, of course, the suicides that we've had over the last couple of years.
The morale has
shifted, as you can imagine, just with the workload and personal life and trying to balance both of them. It's just become really a focus for the agency to pay attention to the workforce, right? And if you are familiar with our basic overall strategy, employee care is one of the main focuses. So resiliency is there to help with the employees and their families.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's super important. And, I got called to work back with the Border Patrol years ago in the resiliency capacity. And I was being contracted to go to different sectors and talk about resiliency and kind of tell my story, and also kind of doing like shaking hands and being just part of the group again, which I felt was a really important move for the Border Patrol with the outside narrative of the kind of demonization of the Border Patrol. It doesn't make it easy to do this job day in and day out, on top of being an agent as well has its own challenges, family life, finances, everything else that goes with that, and just existing. And so I think it's a great shift for the Border Patrol to focus on that. You said that you are a part of a specific division. What is that again?
So that's resiliency. So again, resiliency has those different programs. I specifically oversee now the Critical Incident Response K9 program.
Tell me more about that program.
So it's a brand new program, if you will. It's only been around since January of 2023. The whole focus of this program is to provide another resource for our employees and their families, right? So it started off as what we called the Support K9 program. The handlers are peer support members and chaplaincy members. As handlers, they go and respond to specific events, right? It could be times of stress. It could be happy times. It could be, community events, things like that. But now they have a tool, right? They have their dog, and that dog is used specifically to address, those stressful days that the agents are encountering, the moments that families may need some type of additional support. The dog is just a tool. Obviously, the main part of that team is the handler. The handler knows how to associate the situation and either just be there to help the family, employee, whoever it is, and or also refer them out if needed.
So in our first episode of the podcast, we interviewed Jarrett and Carla, the two individuals that were injured in the human sector. How would the critical incident handlers have assisted in that program or in that specific incident? I'm not sure if they were or
They
not.
were.
They were.
Yeah.
Could you tell me how? Because that'll kind of give me a better understanding of how you implement the dogs.
Yeah, so I actually brought a representative. This is going to act as support canine Janet. She's out of Tucson sector. But when you bring up Jared and Carla, that's a very special case to us because Janet and her handler Stephanie, we joke that we always forget about the handlers' names, right? But Janet and Stephanie were vital in visiting Carla at the hospital from the very beginning. So Janet, as well as the other dogs, they're trained to do, different types of deployments to include the hospital. So hospital beds, waiting rooms, things like that, they're very familiar with. And I'm going to talk more about Carla because,
Yes.
we were in the hospital with Carla and even the rehab facility. Janet was able to visit her once Carla was more alert and was able to see Janet. She knew that she was there from the very beginning. And so she just played a role in making the family feel just more at ease, obviously visiting with Carla, just knowing that she was there. And then because Carla was in Phoenix and then later on went to San Diego, our canine team in El Centro, which is Marcos de Loera and Arthur, who is now retired, they actually would go visit her in the rehab facility. And it's just that opportunity to engage with Carla, with the family, just to have that opportunity to make them feel just a little bit better in that high stress situation. So initially they were known as support dogs. Now it's critical incident response. And that critical incident can really mean anything. It could be something as significant as Jared and Carla's situation, to a very stressful day, maybe, or maybe a different crisis.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it really just shows a presence. One, the Border Patrol sees you and wants to support you. But two, I think when anyone had a relationship with a dog at any point in their life, they know how much it makes them feel better. So that's really cool. Question is, when you guys are at your stations, how do you get notified for a response? When do you know it's time to activate the dogs?
So I'll talk at a more high level, right? So if it is a critical incident or what we call a crisis event, we ourselves get notified through, your significant incident reports. If the sector leads, what we call a sector leads, either peer support or chaplaincy, they make direct contact to us at headquarters to say, hey, this situation is ongoing or this situation just happened. We then put our handlers on alert, right? Whether they're at that sector or a neighboring sector. So now that we've expanded our teams to 9 teams, we have more of a footprint. But before, when we had the first 6, it was harder to kind of move them around just based on the need. But basically the call comes in, so to speak, and then we're not the first on scene, so to speak. We let it play out for a little bit. We wait until everything is situated in the sense to where we know, okay, are we going to a hospital? Are we going to a funeral home? Are we going to somebody's house? And then we go from there. So if it happens within a sector where a handler is actually at, I make that call to the handler. I make them apprised of the situation. They know who they need to coordinate with, whether it's peer support, chaplaincy, or both. And then they go and respond to wherever the situation is. And again, it could be as significant as the hospital, or it could be maybe in somebody's home, or maybe even in the office.
So, and I imagine when the dog is not activated for any kind of critical incidents, they're sitting at their sector. Are they just making the rounds around the sector? Do our agents allowed to pet them whenever they want?
Oh, yeah,
how does that work?
So we talk about critical incidents, but they're not always responding to critical incidents or crisis events, right? We want everyone to associate them to just a good feeling, right? So it's not just significant incidents, but if they're not doing something like that, they're making the rounds at the stations, they're visiting musters, they're visiting, they're supposed to be visiting their stations and their sector, and just make friends, right? At the end of the day, we want the agents, their families to just get to know the team And, they participate in community events. So, for example, you have in Laredo, they're really good about their community events, and they invite Pearl and George down there, and they're always at the high five at school events, and even the local events. They're pretty big at with that. They're members of the community at this point. So they're always looking to serve their fellow employees, right? So employees and families. So good, bad, or indifferent, the teams are there to help.
I've worked with some dogs in my time as a board star agent attached to board tech, and we've used different dogs like sniff dogs and bite dogs and search dogs. What is the process for these dogs being picked to be part of the critical incident response teams?
Yeah, so the first 6 dogs were actually purchased through a vendor called Guide Dogs of the Desert. Their main focus is to help individuals who are blind. So they're guide dogs,
Cool.
right? So they were initially raised for that program. But for some reason, these particular dogs just happen to not make it for that specific program. They may have not have been well developed yet, maybe because they were puppies. Or maybe they still had some struggles, right? They focused more on cats and squirrels versus what they were supposed to do. So we ended up buying the first 6 that way. These other 4 that we just got, it ended up being the same vendor, but they're specifically raised, at least through this vendor, to be guide dogs for blind individuals. So they are meant to be more understanding, problem solving. They're focused on helping their handler and the people that they're serving. So they're raised specifically to help people.
And how about for handlers? When a border patrol agent, they want to maybe take on the task of having a dog and being part of the critical incident canine unit, what do they have to go to pass or graduate from that program?
So our handlers are peer support members or chaplains. That's the first priority. They have to be active and in good standing. And we had our first open solicitation. We asked that they were doing that for at least a minimum of 1 year. So at least they had that experience in the peer support or chaplaincy role for at least a year to know, okay, this is the role of this particular role. Now with the dog, that's the requirement. The handler has to be one of those 2 certifications, because really the dog serves as a tool. The dog is going to direct the handler of what they need to do. The handler needs to be able to respond appropriately. And since they are, certified in peer support chaplaincy, they'll know what to do in that situation based on what they're encountering. So a lot of people now are interested in it, right? They want to be peer support and chaplains, which is great. But we really ask that people who are considering those programs just to be a dog handler, that they really think about it, because these handlers have worked endless hours, sometimes without true appreciation from others. They're there to help employees and their families, of course, but it's not easy. It's not a job where it's like, oh, you're just a dog handler. Your job's so easy. You get to walk around with a cute dog. It's really not. They could literally encounter somebody who was there petting the dog, and all of a sudden it goes from 0 to 60, and without going into much detail, with respect to confidentiality, these handlers could be encountering somebody who could be on the brink of something serious. So the focus on the handlers, again, is to have that background, because they should be knowledgeable enough to know, how can I help this person? What do they need? Do I need to do something immediately? Or is this something where they just want to vent? And that's very possible.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible program. I personally, as an agent, was never familiar with any of the programs the Border Patrol had. They didn't have the veteran program, which is something I probably could have used at the time. And so those who are going to be listening to this, could we possibly go down the list a little bit more again of what the Resiliency Program offers? And so if they are in question of what services are out there for them, they can hopefully have some answers from this podcast. Because I know we get the emails and I just delete them. We're in the muster and they tell us, and again, we just kind of ignore them. Where am I working when we go out there? But sometimes when you're in those rooms and those musters, it's not the place where you want to ask the questions, right? You don't want to ask in front of your friends to the left and to the right. You don't want them to know that you're struggling or you're suffering. And so maybe through this podcast, they're able to get a little bit more information and maybe be able to reach out directly to their supervisor or whatnot.
Yeah, and it's really hard with law enforcement and the stigma of mental
Yeah.
health, right? And that's kind of what we've been struggling for the last couple of years. And when something significant happens, like a suicide, everybody's really like, "Hey, what's happening? What are you doing for us?" Like, it's you rile up those emotions, right? But we're really trying to focus on just the overall health and wellness of our employees and their families, right? So at the end of the day, it is very possible for somebody to um, push those feelings down because they don't want to deal with it, right? They don't want anybody to know that they're going through something. Maybe they don't want to talk about it. They don't know who to talk to, like you're saying. As far as the resiliency division, we're really trying to put, that information out there. So for example, we do what we call the muster minutes. And I know you talk about how you delete that email, right? You don't pay attention to muster, but that's just a way for us to communicate some of this information. And there's things that they have now, like the purposeful app that people can get on their G phones. There's certain things that you can see even in a private setting that, if you wanted to read more into it, you could hear this podcast, right? And get some more of those resources. So it's just an avenue for us to put more information out there. So every pay period, this muster minute goes out and it's just different information, right?
Yeah.
And it's just to put it out there during musters to be, hey, did you know this, right? And sometimes people are like, I never knew that. I've been in for, 15 plus years and I never knew that EAP could do that. Or I never knew of the backup care program, which means I can actually pay back my parents for taking care of my dog or my kids, right? But people don't know that because they're not asking the questions unless it happens to them. Then they're like, oh, where are these resources? What can I do? Who can help me? As always, you have your local peer support members, facilitators, coordinators. Same thing for chaplains and even veteran support. So at local sectors, some may have full-time coordinators. Others may just have one person, depending if it's, northern border or somewhere smaller. But ask, you know what I mean? There's posters, there should be posters, there's emails, there's, sometimes at the MWR events, there's information that gets put out. But really, truly, people don't really pay attention until something happens, right?
So it's
And
personal.
and we don't want that. We just want information sharing. Of course, if you were maybe you got some information that you want to put out, word of mouth actually helps, right? Because once I start telling you, hey, did you know this? And then, hey, it works, right? Then you go on and you tell your fellow coworkers, and that helps too. But that's one of the things that resiliency does. Obviously, at our headquarters level, you have us as program managers over the programs, but we have our local coordinators that are actually, our voices as well. So we reach down to them and we put that information out there saying like, hey, this is what we have from headquarters coming down. Please disseminate to your sectors. And same thing, if they're encountering something that they may not have the answers to, they come up to us and they say, hey, can you help us out? This is the situation we have, and we've actually been able to help a lot of employees. And it's pretty neat to be able to be in a position to help the employees and their families.
When I was doing some of the resiliency program, one of the big call to actions that I would make in the muster room, and it's something I would even say here on this podcast, is the senior agents have all the respect in the room. And it takes those senior agents to take the first step in introducing these programs to the younger agents. They're very impressionable. They're looking to try and do the right thing, and they kind of follow the senior agents in the room. And I would ask all you senior agents is be very open to these programs and understand them so you can help save their lives and assist in the well-being of your brothers and sisters to the left and to the right of you. It seems that the stigma of asking for help, it doesn't change because the older gentlemen in the room or women in the room are kind of like, oh, I don't need that. I'm never going to call that. Like, well, we have to change that thought process. We want a healthier, community in the Border Patrol. And I think it's the call to action to them is to start taking those first steps and being that voice for their muster and for their unit to tell them to ask for help, to ask for support and see what resources are there for them. Because you and I know doing this job is not easy. And whether it's finances, relationships, drinking, I mean, the list goes on and on. We've seen it in our own, ranks. And to avoid that is, I think the leaders in our communities in the ranks of us have to step up.
And, we're doing a better job at that. And I'll give you another example of what my coworkers in the resiliency division have done. They created a curriculum called the Resilient Leader Training.
Nice.
And so that training is that they're actually going around to different sectors and doing that training to leadership to say, these are the resources that we have for resiliency. This is how you as a leader can help your employees and their families. And it's just another resource, another tool for us to say, hey, this is what we have to offer our agency. This is what we recommend you as leaders do to be able to help, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, again, going back to the strategy, we have to focus on our people, right? That never changes. So how are we going to do that? So it's not just senior agents, in the field. It's the supervisors. It's, middle management. It's even, within your sectors all the way up to leadership. And I know B1's pretty supportive of all the resiliency programs that we have, because at the end of the day, we need to focus on our personnel. If we don't take care of our own, how are they going to take care of themselves, take care of their families? It's, it's a ripple effect. And you brought up a good point about senior agents, trying to help those younger agents. But now we're starting to see where these younger agents are actually speaking up. And, I ask that everybody, they be open to it too, because I guess it's just the generation, right? Where they seek more either self-serving or however you want to look at it, right? Self-service, where it's like, what's in it for me? What are you going to do for me? How are you going to take care of me? And that's a very valid question, And so within resiliency, we want everyone to know these are resources for you, for your family. You don't have to have a family like, married with kids, even your parents, whoever you consider a family. We're here to help. And it's for every level, even professional staff, we're doing a better job at, we even have professional staff that are peer support and chaplains for that reason, right? Because we really need to have as many resources out there as possible.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Professional staff. I'm going to have to put my name in the hat for that, because I'd love to.
So I also want to make a point that professional staff can put in to be handlers. We haven't had one yet.
Oh, hey.
But hey, if you're peer support and chaplain,
I'll put
we're
my
looking
name
for
in
it
the hat.
too.
I really would. I didn't know that. And, I travel to different sectors, and sometimes agents feel comfortable telling me some of their struggles, and they know my background. And so I'm a friend to them. I'm an ear to them as much as possible. And if I could look into those programs myself, I'd love to be able to have a little bit more training in that as well. So,
I mean, think about it, right? If an agent's coming to you for help, it's because you are familiar with that environment. You grew up in it. You understand the stresses and the struggles. As somebody who's in a pro staff position, maybe somebody who works in the garage, maybe somebody who might be an intern, their struggles may be similar but different, right? And so who else could help them? Somebody who's in that position as them, who is also peer support or chaplain, or even the veteran support background. If they had that, they can help anybody, And that's the thing,
that's
right?
Awesome.
You don't really know about it until somebody tells you or educates you or says, hey, did you know,
Yeah. I just had a veteran reach out to me who is a board trader and who's coming up on 18 years of service or so. And he's just like, man, I'm just not sure what I want to do. And I was like, did you know there's a veteran resource program? Because I had no idea. And I was like, let me connect you. And so
oh my gosh.
He's actually trying to transition from his current job just to do that, because he feels compelled to serve in that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just awesome to know that, because I just barely learned that weeks prior to that. I was able to connect the dot for him. And I'm hoping that's going good for him. But I didn't know that I could actually myself be a part of the program. So I'm definitely going to talk to my supervisor right now and try and make that happen.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time. Honestly, I really appreciate being able to hopefully educate and give more information to the agents who are out there, hopefully listening to this. Hopefully they're all listening to this podcast right now and learning. Is there any last words you want to say to the agents on the ground who are doing their job, who are potentially listening to this podcast now?
Yeah, no. So I just, as kind of a pitch to my program, we have 9 critical incident response canine teams now. We have one in Blaine, San Diego, El Centro, Tucson, El Paso. I have to go down the border, Del Rio, Big Bend, Laredo, and RGV. So just so that we're slowly growing the program, because we see that, how important this is. And we're hoping to put a team in every single sector. But to go back to resiliency, we're really here for you. We're here for your families. We're here for everybody. If you guys had questions, if you have any concerns, if you don't know, don't hesitate to reach out, because you just don't know just the resources that we have to offer. There is support at all levels. Sometimes it seems like nobody's listening to us. Maybe it seems like nobody cares, but they do. And you might have to shift through a couple of people to get to the one person that will hear you and do something for you to help. And it's not just you, it's the families too. So there could be a lot of stress. There could be a lot of moments of just frustration, but there are people and resources here to help.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. If you guys have any questions on any of the programs that are available to you, please reach out directly if you need to. Reach out to your supervisors. Thank you for listening to this episode of Into the Fringe.
You never know what's ahead, but once you start, it's all or nothing. Because it's not just tradition, looking danger in the eyes, refusing to let it stop you. So summon your courage, trust your training, trust your team, and trust that when the work is done, you'll look back proud you defended your legacy, knowing exactly what and who you were protecting.